Travis Strikes Again takes you back into the shoes of the crownless king once more, with the story set a few years after the events of the desperate struggle. The story starts off with a cutscene of another assassin known by the name of Badman making his way to find Travis to kill him to get revenge on his daughter who you killed in the first game. Upon reaching Travis' trailer, they'll fight for a few minutes before being sucked into a games console known only as the Death Drive 2. From here though, your aim is to fight through 7 games, with the plot slowly unravelling as the game progresses. Upon starting this game, you'll immediately notice that this game actually plays slightly differently. Instead of it being a third-person hack and slash, this is more of a top-down variant with a rather basic setup for its combat. While the combat will remain basic through the majority of the game, with a heavy and light swing being your main focus, you'll also have the ability to unlock new skills throughout the game which will change up how the game combat plays. These are special abilities that both Travis and Badman can use, which you'll be able to unlock from using skill chips which you'll be finding throughout the game, as well as from beating the final boss of each stage. As for what these skills can do, you'll get various abilities like slowing down time, making a healing barrier, and flinging enemies all over the place, and a bunch of others. What's also good about this is that you can mix and match with the chips that you find in the game, with the restriction of only having 4 equipped at a time, but don't worry, you can actually just change these out on the fly while interacting with your character on the pause menu. Besides that, you'll also get the ability to level up your character, increasing their health and overall damage. Over time though, I ended up finding a loadout that works best for me, and a bunch of the new skill chips that I'd unlocked didn't really sound all that appealing to me, so I think there's a bit of a balancing problem, although it could just be down to preference. Thankfully though, you can't really spam these abilities as there is a timing delay for each ability, and of course depending on what the ability actually is, the actual timing will vary. I will say that this definitely helps in keeping the game interesting, especially when it comes to the level design of all these levels. While some will have separate theming and gimmicks to keep the game interesting, the actual main part of the level is well, it's kind of dull and rather formulaic. Throughout the 7 stages of the game, you'll be doing the same thing over and over, fighting your way through swarms of enemies, with a mid-boss and then another boss at the end. Throughout all the levels though, you'll start to encounter various types of enemies, with some being more ranged focused, while most of them will end up being up close and personal. But to tell these enemies apart, a majority of them you'll just see a colour swap from red to blue, and in certain levels this can be a pain in the ass to see due to how far back the camera is. Now this is nothing new when it comes to No More Heroes, as they've always been rather weak in the basic enemies department, especially in the first game as they're all pretty much the same. But I was definitely hoping for a bit more variety with them this time round, but closer to the end of the game you do start to see more variety, but it doesn't appear that often, so it's just kind of a wasted potential. And sadly this is the same when it comes to the bosses in this game, as they don't get any better. Nothing really feels unique about them, there's no real build up towards them, and you'll get a brief conversation with them before the fight starts and then that's it. And honestly, I think that's a big problem with this game overall. I don't mind text-based conversations in a game like Final Fantasy as it's an RPG, but when it comes to a hack and slash, I really don't like the idea of being stopped every few minutes for a dialogue box to appear, and especially when it's something I don't really care that much about. But if you weren't sick to death with text after the first level, then believe me, give it a few minutes because it ends up getting way worse. As upon beating a level, you'll unlock a new chapter for something called Travis Strikes Back, which at first sounds like a sub-game in the game, but instead it's just a text-based cutscene explaining how Travis found the next death ball to progress the actual story itself. These chapters are rather amusing and definitely do fit into the humour of the previous games, but I think the lack of cutscenes in this game overall ends up being a bit of a bigger problem over time. While they're amusing to read, they just take so long to go through. A majority of them last roughly 10 minutes, but the first one took me 20 minutes to go through. Now obviously this will vary depending on how fast you read it, but because I was trying to get a better idea of what was actually going on, I wasted a lot of my time just to find out that in the end, it was just one big joke poking fun at game design and trying to break the 4th wall, which thinking about it now does feel kind of funny, but when I was sitting there for 20 minutes of my time after beating the first level, yeah, I wasn't that pleased. Personally, I think these would have been fine if they weren't after every single level in the game. I want to play the game and, you know, try to get to grips with it, not read a massive paragraph about how Travis got a milkshake. And after getting halfway through the game, I just kind of gave up trying to read these and tried to skip through all of them. But even then, it felt like it was lasting far too long. And I think this is a problem for the majority of the game. Even the levels in this game last a bit too long for my liking. Normally a longer lasting level in the game is a good idea, especially when there's a variety in the gameplay that's being offered, but unfortunately in Travis Strikes Again, they're just too long and there's very little variety that goes into these levels. Now as I said earlier, the main area of gameplay is just fighting your way through a horde of enemies while making your way to the final boss. And while most of these levels attempt to make little differences in the level design, they just feel the same and last a bit too long. Now when the game does try to be different, it is definitely noticeable, but it's not always great. For example, there's a side-scrolling based level where you just make your way through a mansion trying to find coffee and donuts, while another level has you roaming down the street while changing the street's path to get to a specific point. But that's about it. It's very little differences that make it look different at first, but after a minute you just realise you're doing the same thing again, it's just another camera angle. But in saying that, there are actually 2 levels in this game that do have mini games attached to them. But while one of them is actually rather fun and kind of hits the nostalgia bone, the other one's just shit. It's a level that features a racing minigame which you'd expect to be fun, but after playing it, it just ended up making this the worst level in the game for me. You're forced to play through these levels that you'll fail on purpose for the first time before unlocking another floor to fight through so you can upgrade your vehicle, which is fine, I have nothing wrong with that. It's definitely a good idea to try and split up the gameplay every now and again, but what I do have a problem with, however, is the minigame itself. So the minigame, instead of being a race itself, is more about changing the gears to get ahead of your opponent. Yeah, I'm not kidding, that's all you do is you hold down one button to accelerate, and then at certain points in the race you'll just change your gears by holding down another button and then moving the box towards the next gear. That's not fun. It's not difficult besides the final race, as it really requires RNG to work in your favour. But I'm struggling to understand why this was even a thing. It's not fun in the slightest. It's more irritating than anything else. Now thankfully, there are some levels in this game that are actually really fun. There's obviously the coffee and donuts level, which I mentioned before. It's a bit bizarre but fun to run through. Or if you're up for a bit of fan service, do you happen to know of a little game called Shadow of the Damned? Well, if you don't, that's a real shame, because there's an entire level set in the Damned universe. It's not even a tiny reference to the game. There's several locations in this level that I immediately recognised from the game. And I consider this my favourite level in the game, as I really enjoyed playing Shadow of the Damned when it came out, so seeing it once again was actually rather fun. But sadly, that Damned level was the final level of the main game, so after beating all these levels you'll end up discovering that you've helped Batman achieve one of his goals, which was to resurrect his daughter. Kind of, it gets a bit weird, but you'll get one more chapter of Travis Strikes Again where you'll find out that there's one last game that was never meant to be seen by the public, and after playing it I kinda get why, but I think I got the wrong reason for this. This is by far the worst looking level in the entire game. It's not a bad level by all means, it's pretty standard, it's just the same as always. You just fight your way through a bunch of corridors before confronting the final boss. But I mean, look at this. This honestly looks worse than a level missing textures in the Unreal Engine, and there is a level in this game which is based on an early access phase, and it still looks better than this. Why not make that level, which was incredibly short, this level? They should have just made the final level a mock of every early access title out there. Not whatever this is, but to give it a bit of praise, there are some good parts to this level. There's a bunch of references to another great game called Hotline Miami, and then after the final boss fight, which for a change was actually challenging, the ending of this game is just so bloody weird, but it was so amusing at the same time. I don't even know if this ending is a reference to anything. If it is, please let me know, but it was just fucking weird, but I love it. But while that's all you have to do in the main game, there are some other things you can do on the side as well. Throughout the game you'll end up getting faxes from your cat somehow, who managed to get themselves lost inside the game, so you'll have to traverse back through the levels and find her. Thankfully most of the times though you can just locate her by a save point that's close by, so you don't have to go through the entire level again, but perhaps if you're a completionist you might want to, as there's a few different tokens that you'll find through the game, so you can buy different shirts for Travis and Batman to wear that actually reference a bunch of different games. Surprisingly, Stanley Parable was one of them. And there's also some hidden characters that yeah, I never found out where to find them, so I'll have to get back to you on that one. Now, upon beating the game, there is actually one more little secret, and it's pretty obvious to find it, as you just need to speak to Shinobu in your camp. But I won't say what happens, because I think you'll like it.
What the hell?
Shut up, you fucking mutt! Did you just call Charlotte a fucking mutt?
So that was Travis Strikes Again for the Nintendo Switch. It's not a terrible game. I can understand the frustration of waiting so many years for a third game in No More Heroes, but the people saying that this game, if it doesn't do well, is going to kill No More Heroes 3, I don't believe that one bit. I don't think that's how it's going to work. But I think they were just trying to do that so you actually play the game, and there is a lot to appreciate in it, especially if you like references to other games as well. Plus, there is a season pass that comes with it, so hopefully the other missions that we'll be getting will make the game even better. But that can only be a matter of time until we find out, so until then, thank you all so much for watching. My name is Sir Crackerbulb, and have a cracking week. Goodbye.